Napoleon's final gamble, the beginning of a fall. In our previous video, we witnessed the blazing glory of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who once brought all of Europe to its knees under the iron will of the French Empire. From the snowy fields of Austerlitz to the thunder of Jena Auerstedt, his victories painted him as an invincible force of nature. But the higher he climbed, the further he had to fall. And so began the final act, a tragic descent into the abyss. From power to peril. In October 1809, fresh from crushing the Fifth Coalition, Napoleon stood at the zenith of his power. But greatness breeds ambition, and ambition often blinds. Unable to produce an heir with Empress Josephine, Napoleon made a heart-wrenching decision. In January 1810, they divorced. 3 months later, he married Marie-Louise of Austria, the daughter of his former enemy, Emperor Francis I. It was a move to secure dynastic legitimacy and political alliance, but it sowed the seeds of future isolation. When their son Francois Bonaparte, the so-called King of Rome, was born a year later, Napoleon finally had his legacy. But across the icy plains of Russia, another monarch watched with growing unease. A storm brews in the east. The Tsar of Russia, Alexander I, was growing wary. Napoleon's expanding empire, his annexation of Oldenburg, and his reshaping of Europe into his personal chessboard, it was all too much. When Napoleon seized territories tied to Russian nobility, the Tsar retaliated. He withdrew from the continental system, reopened his ports to British trade, and banned imports from France. To Napoleon, it was treason. To his ego, it was war. So he did what no general in Europe dared imagine. He planned the largest invasion the continent had ever seen. He would bring Russia to its knees, just like the rest of Europe. The greatest military campaign in European history. By June 1812, Napoleon had assembled an army of nearly 700,000 men. This Grande Armée included soldiers from France, Italy, Germany, Austria, Prussia, and beyond, all marching east under the imperial eagle. With over 1,400 cannons, 80,000 cavalry, and nearly 200,000 horses, it was not just an army, it was a juggernaut. A war machine unlike any in history. But Russia was ready. Under General Barclay de Tolly, the Russians avoided direct battle. Instead, they retreated and scorched the earth, burning food, bridges, and supplies behind them. They lured Napoleon deep into the vast, empty heart of Russia, where time, disease, and starvation would do the killing. The Black Summer of 1812. As the army advanced, disaster struck. The heat was suffocating. Water was scarce. Disease ripped through the camps like wildfire. In the first weeks of July alone, tens of thousands died not from bullets, but from thirst, dysentery, and exhaustion. Desertion spread. Morale crumbled. Napoleon, once a master of speed and precision, found himself trapped in a land without end. In mid-August, he reached Smolensk, a vital city on the Dnieper River, where the Russian army had regrouped. He hoped for a decisive battle, a second Austerlitz, but the Russians, ever cautious, refused to play his game. Eventually, under political pressure from home and their own soldiers, the Russian generals agreed they would stand and fight. Smolensk in flames. The battle begins. On the 16th of August, the skies over Smolensk turned black. French cannons roared. The thunder of drums, the clash of steel, the screams of war. Smolensk became a city of fire and fury. Murat's cavalry stormed the outskirts. Ney's infantry tore through the defenses. Buildings exploded into flames. Smoke swallowed the streets. Napoleon's flags waved triumphantly, but the Russians, battered yet unbroken, escaped into the night. Napoleon had taken the city, but not the war. The enemy had slipped away. The trap was tightening. And deeper still, into the unforgiving Russian wilderness, the Grande Armée marched on toward Borodino, toward Moscow, toward destiny. End of Part 1. To be continued in Part 2, Borodino and the Frozen March to Moscow.